Okay, we're all set.
Alrighty. So we will now receive an update from Executive Director Runyon regarding rules and development.
Executive Director Runyon. So I'll take a few minutes to further consider some things that we've already mentioned in the previous end of legislation report, as well as touch on some things that staff are working on internally. And even though some of this information is duplicated, and we'll contextualize the information here within the confines of the board's newly adopted rules prioritization list. So, of course, you know that the highest priority or the immediate priorities are a derivative of past legislation. So HB 5028 or our budget bill involving the licensing fee increase. And permanent rules are drafted there, and we had that emergency meeting to adopt temporary rules for immediate implementation of the fee increase. In regards to SB 236, and we've already talked about the locker component, and I believe it's staff's intention and all things considered, and if applicable, we'll amend these rules related to lockers as a derivative of the passage of SB 236 and take those to the November rulemaking hearing, I believe. So we'll bring it to the board in October and then take it to the November rulemaking hearing at that point. And hopefully that'll be the same case with the MOUD protocol that we're working on. And with regards to HB 3045 or the HPSP bill, if you will, and just to give you some background in terms of the actual language from the bill there, it allows the board to require a person to undergo investigation for a violation of this chapter or OIR 5. Or rules adopted under this chapter and to undergo a mental, physical, chemical dependency or competency evaluation at the person's expense if the board has objectively reasonable grounds to believe that that person is or may be unable to practice pharmacy with reasonable skill and safety. Again, sections 2 and 3 of this bill become effective, or at least 1 and 2 rather, and become effective 1/1/2026. But again, we're working with all of the partner agencies involved to look at best practices and unify monitoring and administrative requirements, et cetera. So we have an ample process in place to send those as required through the rulemaking process before the 1/1/2026 date. And in addition to that, so we'll juggle the following priorities with the immediate demands from the legislative session. Of course, compounding was on the list, and we have that here today. And after this, we'll begin discussing that. We've already discussed pharmacy prescribing of vaccines and all the rule amendments that are relative to that. And the DSCSA, this will take precedence over other high priority items and subsequent weekly rulemaking groups, not work groups, internal groups as to staff juggle and make incremental progress on this with the legislative demands. And staff will also keep in mind, as outlined in the strategic plan, that we ensure to approach rules at an appropriate pace for the board and public to stay engaged and informed of changes. So it's just a brief, kind of high-level overview of what we focus on and will continue to in the weekly rule groups that we have internally. President Joyce, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
President Joyce, are there any questions on what you just went over? As rules in development. Moving on, we will now begin rules policy discussion, mailing E regarding drug compounding proposed rules with Executive Director Runyon. Quick point of clarification. What is the time frame on compounding. I mean, what do you foresee? We're still at the discussion phase, and we started the discussion phase 2 years ago in 2023, and 3 executive directors ago, and 2 clinical consultants, pharmacy consultants ago. And so, what do you see, Executive Director Runyon, as a reasonable time frame to get this to the rulemaking part of rules onto the next stage? I mean, what are we exactly waiting for? I mean, I know we'll be discussing some new things today and acting, but what do you foresee time frame wise, based on what's before us? Compounding.
Executive Director Runyon. So ideally, or perhaps optimistically, or delusionally, if you will, there's a lot of content here. The board has changed considerably over the last 2.5 years, in its not only direction, but also constitution. So understanding that there is a wealth and breadth of information here, I would be afraid to say what that might look like until we get into the conversations, and see how long these individual topics are going to take. If everything went smoothly, we could do the necessary research based on feedback the board presents today to create further rule amendments as directed and then bring those back to October. I'm just not sure without getting into that and seeing how the discussion is going to go, whether or not that timeline is feasible. And that would be the quickest, making those amendments in between now and the October board meeting, and then take any derivatives thereof to the November rulemaking hearing. And then we have the December option after that. In terms of the next board meeting, that would be the quickest timeline. I'd be afraid to go on record and say that I'm optimistic that will happen. But that's just one potential outcome of today's discussion.
Okay, yeah, and then there are new board members, and the dynamic is different as from 2 years ago. And so I'm looking forward to hear their feedback on this information today. So yeah, go ahead and get started on the compounding. Okay, go ahead.
Board Member Patel, before we go into the discussion about the drug compounding, I know that we had a work group about 2 years ago, but that work group, as me and other board member, the former board member also raised a concern that that work group was misled. The board member, we did not get the accurate information, which is true because I was listening that compounding work group as well. And I think I was a board member in that compounding work group too. With that said, are we going to have a rec and do it right this time? Because all the compounding licensee, they made the comments about 2 years ago. Now we are going to revisit. Are we going to have any other rec? Or I am not a big fan of the work group. I think we should have rec. Not for every rulemaking, not for every division, but the certain division, which is very important to licensee for the public safety. So that's my 2 thoughts.
This is board member Joy. So we can let's look at this and see what we have, see what edits we can make. And then we can definitely bring that up towards the end to see how and then we can also go into executive session and get some board counsel on RAC versus work group. Yeah, so that we can get started on this and just get some ideas and make their edits and corrections and put our experience to use here. Thank you.
Executive Director Runyon. So I think that's one of the opportunities present today, is that regardless of what experience anyone might have had with the work groups prior to today, what inclinations they might have had or have currently, is you have essentially a blank slate because you can express your opinions in any way that you want, regardless of whether or not you feel that, for example, work group opinions were conveyed appropriately and appropriately incorporated into recommendations present by the amended rules. All of that to say you can have the discussions any way you want today. So it's yours to do with what you see fit today, regardless of what happened in the past or what led you here. And that's what I would like to focus on, is what does this board today, as these rules are presented at this moment in time, want to do with them. And I think you have the opportunity through the discourse to ensure that that happens, if that makes sense. And I think, Bree did, or Compliance Director Efremov and board staff Melvin did an excellent job of providing supplementary resources in the appropriate folders to kind of give further background or a little contextualization to this. And I'll discuss that. This is a good segue into kind of the primers to introduce this. So we'll introduce mailing E, Drug Compounding Division, which is also present in Division 6, 41, 43, and the newly minted or Division 183. And today, the board will continue to review the full proposed rules for compounding in Division 183, created for drug compounding. And as a reminder, part of the 2024 through 2029 strategic plan, agencies are working to systematically refresh rules and standardize rule development to improve clarity, compliance, and longevity of rules, and in line with the board's mission to promote and protect the public. Amending rules for drug compounding to ensure consistency with updated USP chapters, starting with Chapter 795 and 797, is in the high priority category for the rules prioritization list, of course, adopted by the board earlier this year at its April 2025 board meeting. Additionally, creating a new Division 183 is in alignment with the board's division vision created during the 2022-2026 strategic plan, with a goal to make rules easier to locate for licensees, registrants, and the public. So in reviewing rules today, it's important to remember the history and input that went into creating them. So a few points here. For these rules, the board utilized a work group, as board member Patel mentioned, to develop and revise these compounding rules. The work group met 5 times: February 23, April 23, May 23, June 23, and July 23. As a reminder, the work group is a public body and subject to public meetings laws. Work group members represented the interests of persons, communities, or entities likely to be affected by the rule. Work group members provided advice and insight on specific topics and proposed rules related to those topics to the board. And based on input from the work group and used in the lens of patient safety, agency staff drafted the rules and modifications to the proposed rules. In June 2023, the board sent these rules to rulemaking for public comment only. And based on public comment and further work group input in July 2023, agency staff made further modifications to the proposed rules. Then the board reviewed, discussed, and proposed changes to the rules at April, June, August, and December 2023 board meetings, and February, April, and June 2024 meetings to create the current version you're seeing today. And this version, mailing E, contains the most recent version of board-directed changes implemented. And staff understands there have been many changes to the board and its membership over the course of the compounding rules discussions that have spanned the last 2.5 years. And we're happy to revisit any topics as needed. And due to the sheer volume of discussion and direction has occurred for these rules, staff might need additional time to research and follow up on questions asked to ensure the most accurate responses possible are provided. And staff asked the board for patience and grace as we collectively navigate a discussion, again, that spanned over 2.5 years and that has not collectively been discussed board for over a year now. Before diving into the rule sets, it's important that you understand that highlighted changes that have occurred since the board's last visit of the compounding rules discussions, specifically May 2nd, 2025, the newest USP version became effective. In 2024, House Bill 4010 passed and stated the following: the addition of flavoring to a drug intended for dispensation may not be considered compounding if the flavoring Number one is inert, non-allergenic, and has no effect other than imparting a flavor to the drug or modifying the flavor of the drug. And two, does not constitute more than 5% of the total volume of the drug. And changes to the proposed rules the board is viewing today reflect those recent updates. And to further orient the board to public mailing E, you can see the gray box is a bit more robust than we normally see. Staff felt that it was important to pull together all of the previously provided resources as a part of this discussion, including work group and board meeting dates and minutes, to hopefully pick the conversation back up where it was left. The board and public will also see another section that was added to the rules document that is not typically needed, which is the timeline of events section, but as previously described, due to the long history of the board review and discussion on these rules, staff felt it was necessary to provide a visual timeline of events and to provide additional context and aid in informed discussion. So for today's review, staff felt it would be easiest to continue the review in this clean format since the major overhaul and structural changes were made as part of this new division. And this means that the entire division of 183 is bolded and underlined. Staff have listed at the end of the rules Division 45, which will need to be repealed if and when Division 183 is adopted. Also, please note there are several sections that are highlighted in blue. If the board chooses to keep these rules at effective dates, language may need to be considered and updated. Also, for legislation that passed in 2024, and the HB 4010, which I mentioned, will update the ORS number in the rules once it's been assigned. And for division language that is proposed to be removed in Division 6, 41, and 43, it's struck through a new language is bolded and underlined. Highlighted sections indicate versions that were current as of 7/2025. And in response to President Joy, something you brought up earlier, as to what the vision is for this, it's important to note that staff is not asking the board to send this to rulemaking necessarily. We will ask the board for direction on next steps after the rules are reviewed in their entirety, and staff will respond accordingly. Now, let's begin reviewing the proposed compounding rules. And for this review, I will read each section of rules to orient the board and public to the language proposed, and then pause after each set to seek board input. I will ask each board member to provide comments and then open it up to any further comments as appropriate. I would ask each board member, if you do not have a comment, that you specify why. In other words, no comment because the language is okay, or no comment because you're unsure whether you like the language or not, or no comment because you need more time or do not agree with the language, etc. And that explicit feedback allows staff to further move in correspondence with board direction, as it gives us more detailed information to do so with. And this detail will help us to correctly track the board's consensus and to ensure updates are made in alignment with board direction. So first, we'll look at the applicability section, which is 855-183-0001. And it's important to note that with the board's full vision changes, that this will be soon, that this will be coming soon in updates reflected by the DSCSA updates, and a registration type and division of rules will be needed to be created for outsourcing facilities. But as written here, it's currently in alignment with other board rules in place. So in parent 1, any person, including any business entity located in or outside Oregon that engages in the practice of compounding a drug for dispensing, delivery, or distribution in Oregon must register with the board as a drug outlet and comply with board regulations. Parent 2, these rules apply to sterile and non-sterile compounding of a drug for humans and animals. And parent 3, entities that are registered with FDA as an outsourcing facility under Section 503B of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 21 U.S.C. 353B must register with the board as a manufacturer in OAR 855060. And President Joyce, I'll open it up to you for discussion.
This President Joyce, I'll just go ahead and start first. This particular section regarding applicability, this is it's clear as crystal. For me, it's kind of like a commandment for Board of Pharmacy. Board Member Chin,
Board Member Chen, it seems clear to me. No comments other than that.
so
Member Patel, no comments on applicability.
Board Member Kroger.
Board Member Kroger, I think it's super important that we get this right, this time, and I think, I would like to see and be able to understand in one view the differences between, I think the tough part about a new division is that everything's underlined in bold, everything's new. So it takes a bit of digging to understand what was actually changed from the previous division. To be able to understand and highlight that in some manner would be really beneficial to me as a board member to understand, hey, this is the same language we used to have, or this is new language and there's a concern, or not, or this is really improved language. And the other piece that I think, since there has been, and I don't know if this is possible retrospectively, but I think prospectively and proactively, I would like to see if we've received public comment or concerns and have that highlighted as to why or why not staff accepted or incorporated those public comments. I think it's also important for us to understand why a comment or concern was not addressed by staff. I think you can think back to even earlier today, right? There was 2 comments that we did incorporate and staff highlighted, but there was one that was not addressed unless a board member actually noticed it and brought it up. I would like to see that going forward, understanding that, hey, there was a comment on this section, but we didn't feel it was important. It was appropriate to incorporate, and this is why that decision was made. Because I think as a board member, that makes it a bit easier for me to understand, how decisions were made. And I think reflecting on the process that the California Board of Pharmacy recently went through, it was done in spreadsheet style. Board staff responded to why comments or amendments were not accepted. And I would love to be able to see that to feel very confident in my decisions moving forward. This particular section at this time, I'm okay with it, but it's not because I'm in agreement with the language necessarily. I don't have the context I need to be able to be in favor of it at this point. That makes sense. And it'll probably be the same for just about every section, except for excluding the few that I currently have concerns with. If that makes sense. Thank you.
Board Smith.
Board Member Smith, I don't really have any issues with this section. Seems pretty standard language.
Member Hall.
Member Hall, well said. Board Member Kroger. That would be very helpful. I agree. But this particular section, I don't notice any reason why I'm not okay with it.
Vice President Kirkbride.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns about this section. It appears to be similar to what we already have.
And Board Member Pino.
Board Member Binedo, I have no concerns with the language on this. I do want to say thank you to board staff and everyone that's involved with this, because I feel like since I originally started on the board, this was a big thing. Like, when are we going to get to this? When are we going to get to this? So I appreciate everybody's effort in presenting this to the board.
Back to you, Executive Director Runyon.
Executive Director Runyon, thank you for the comments and context there. And we'll move next to 855-183-0005. And I'll read the rule section first here. And parent one, phrases or definitions used in OAR 855-183 are the same as included in the USP standard adopted by reference unless otherwise specified. Compounding means the process of combining, admixing, diluting, pulling, reconstituting, or otherwise altering a drug product or bulk drug substance to create a new preparation. Parent A, for non-sterile preparations, compounding does not include reconstituting according to the manufacturer's labeling. And parent B, for sterile preparations, compounding includes repackaging. This is a USP definition of compounding, and you'll see later in section 0700, additional clarification of what is not compounding and the inclusion of HB 4010 to carve out flavoring under certain conditions will be present. So we can revisit the section in context if needed when we get to rule section 0700 of this division. President Joyce, I'll open it up to you for comment.
Board Member Chin.
Member Chen, I have no further comments. It seems clear.
Member Patel.
Member Patel, I think we had robust discussion on the definition of compounding. I do remember. I did work on this compounding section about 2 years ago. I had my every comments, everything I saved up on my laptop, but we can't use our personal device. So I don't have in front of me. But I'm just going to repeat just the new board members and just to put on the record that compounding definition here, we adopt from the USP, but this one, USP in my mind is not regulatory body. FDA is a regulatory body. We should adopt the compounding definition of what FDA has it. And they do have different definition. Because this one reconstituting, they just think as a compound, and in my mind, and according to FDA definition, it's not. So there's a difference. Some might agree, some might not agree. You should go by what FDA proposed because ultimately they are the regulatory body.
Member Kroger, you want to expand on that?
Board Member Kroger, I am not an expert in compounding, so that's why I have lots of questions and want, I think, more context in general when we review these. My concern would be around the, and I can't recall in those meetings previously around the USP standard adopted by reference and the concerns around the accessibility of those USP standards. I believe it's, you have to purchase those to be able to actually reference those. And I know that there is discussions around, can we reference something that would require a licensee to purchase a subscription or whatever product that USP has. So that would be my concern. And I think that is threaded throughout the rules. If this is already discussed and figured out, enlighten me, but that would be my concern with the definition is that we're referencing something that requires licensees. It's not like ACIP that is just for the public. USP does require, you can't just add, not anybody can access it, the full version of it, I believe.
Board Member Smith.
Board Member Smith, as we're going through this, I'm realizing there's a lot more research I'd probably like to do on some of these things. And so, I mean, nothing stands out immediately to me. I do know that the USP standards, there's some contention on like how those are best applied. So yeah, this is something I'll definitely have to do some more research on. Thank you.
Member Hall.
Member Hall, yeah, I want to hear FDA and USP a little bit more the fact that you have to pay for, access is a problem if we're just referring and not stating what SPs are getting, so that's kind of an issue too.
Board Vice President Kirkbride.
I don't have any comments at this time, but I agree with other board members that I need more time with some of the definitions in here.
Board Member Pineda?
Board Member Pinedo, nothing to add at this time. I agree with other board members.
All right, so President Joyce, so this is regarding definition, so it's verbatim USP definition of compounding, is that right, verbatim, word for word? Is that accurate? Okay, I'm seeing it, and nodding yes. And then so can we pull up the definition, the FDA definition, and compare the two to see? Can we address that now? So we can address this at this moment, at this time? Or is this too big of a,
Let me see
Ask.
what's in that folder.
I mean, the issue was brought up. So can we just compare the two to see what is concerning?
Well, I can't open USB, so.
And, access to FDA, information as opposed to USB, that's, information, is there a cost difference? There's no cost, right, to access FDA, information, because you had brought up FDA versus USP, and USP is a private entity and not a regulatory board, or not regulatory agency, so, can you expand on that a little bit? Board Member Patel and Board Member Kroger?
Yeah, you're right. So FDA is regulatory body, right? And USB is private organization.
Mm.
So, and yes, you had to pay about, I think, $400-500.
To get the USB
Yep, USB.
loaded.
So to me, it's also kind of like, are we going to endorse them? Because, you know, they are for profit. It's not like they're not for profit. FDA is like regulatory. Yes. You sure?
But they still cost money.
Yeah, it still costs money, but FDA you can access anytime. It's just regulatory board.
You had a concern with the definitions between, for compound, the word compound?
Also to clarify though, the board does, when we adopt things by reference, we keep copies in the office. So I know it's not as easy as just going on a website, looking it up yourself, but the board does have access and ability to share copies of it with.
Go ahead.
But how do you get access to those?
You have to reach out to the B. So, yeah, free.
Yeah, I
Or,
would say
no,
that,
not free.
but
You
like
pay.
this right here.
Jasmine Rockmont, I think, so part of just to kind of
Big.
bring big picture again too, so FDA regulations, there's carve outs for how they're regulated if you're a 503A or a 503B, depending on those regulations, and they don't necessarily regulate 503A. That's usually deferred to the state boards of pharmacy and how you regulate. 503B or outsourcing facilities that are looked at as kind of GMP light or manufacturer light and have a different set of regulations. So really the expert level, or at least it appears from what some other boards have done, this has really become the standard. We need to pull up all the research again to share all the numbers again. I want to speak as best as I can to this, but I know all this research was done and presented to how many states have already adopted USP as their standard reference. We have the same questions and issues related to it. It's something that is a fee service that you have to pay for to get access to. And then when we reference something, how are individuals able to get access? And I believe, Rachel, if you scroll up, I thought there's a
Yeah.
little,
There's a phrase
yep, there's a phrase in all of the rules that say publications referenced are available for review at the agency or from the United States Pharmacopoeia. So we can allow people to come in and get access to those. Again, we do not hand it out, but they come in the office and they will be able to review them. So that's the way that was handled within the reference. Obviously, the board can do whatever the board chooses to do, and we can definitely make notes on how we can probably bring back the information you're asking more to, and to make sure that we are looking at the correct FDA citation and kind of pulling all of this into context from the discussion that's happening here, it sounds like we should do a little bit more work to make the conversation a little easier and have that information facilitated in a more meaningful way. Appreciate the feedback.
So,
Board Member Bashir, yeah, no, I understand about the reference. I mean, if I think about myself, if I want to review for free, I have to drive Tuesday to here. Then I have to stay overnight, go back. Not practical, just FYI, right?
Yeah. No. It is available.
Yeah, yeah. So the two things, right? Whether it's available and then practicality of it, right? It's two different things. The second thing is like, yes, you're right. There's a 503A and 503B. And 503B come under good manufacturing practice under FDA, that's true. 503A, however, yes, it's come under Board of Pharmacy, but FDA, they can also have jurisdiction over 503A. They can also come and inspect your 503A facility as well. So to me, the both 503A and B, they both come under FDA, and then, but the Board of Pharmacy also has to say 503, how they regulate the 503A, but then FDA also can come with big hammer, and they can also regulate if there is something that's going on.
this is for President Joyce. So you had mentioned, you weren't comfortable with the definition of compounding, or just the word reconstitution, because you don't think reconstitution is compounding?
Me as a personally, as a licensee, as a compounding pharmacist, anything, I think we should accept FDA definition of compounding. It's more broader than this definition creates so much chaos. I know that there's a pharmacy, they just stop reconstituting the antibiotic, they just not giving those, go lightly for colonoscopy. There's the omeprazole, everyone has to buy that super expensive version of the liquid omeprazole, and you just name it. And I was like, if our intention is more kind of in the name of the public safety, but public safety, the first thing come to my mind is access. So if you don't have the access, how are you going to do public safety in this regards? That's what my thing is. So diluting too, like, are you going to say if you dilute something with water, now it's compounding, so do flavoring, and thank God for that bill about the flavoring. And I was like, well, the small kiddos, they're not going to take their antibiotic if there is no flavor and there is no if you don't take antibiotic, then how that's going to help? So, thanks.
This was brought to, I mean, this was the work group's idea, right? And you're part of the work group.
Board Member Patel, I don't want to say something which, create another chaos, but I don't think that was the work group idea. That actually I understand, but.
Board Member Hall.
Member Hall, doesn't, 2A clarify, but go lightly in the other reconstituting of non-sterile? Good.
It's just a sterile and non-sterile, but still they're compounding, right? So if you don't have compounding facility.
Compounding does not include reconstituting for non-sterile preparations.
So now they don't, but back in the day, when this started, I do remember some of the pharmacy, they just like, they're not going to dispense that. Now, there's so much change now after so much clarification and everything, but.
Do we have a general consensus on what is in 855-183-0005? I mean, I know there's a discussion between FDA versus USP, but is that really the only holdup for this section, or is your concern for USP versus FDA and USP being a private entity? Is that gonna?
Member Kroger, I don't have strong feelings because I don't have that level of knowledge that Board Member Patel has on the FDA definition of compounding. My concern is the USP standards adopted by reference. I know that this is something we do quite a bit for this particular aspect of the profession. This is not a practical, applicable approach to have one free copy available at the board's office. How are our inspectors going to inspect across the state unless they have fully memorized the standards by reference as well? That language is woven throughout this rule package. Other states that have adopted USP as kind of the standard. And I think that's also important to recognize, we've got standards, we've got regulations, we've got laws, and how those all, kind of meet together. Some states are putting the actual language into rule, so that it is available digitally for the public. I think access to sterile and non-sterile compounded products is incredibly important for the health and safety of the people here in Oregon. So that was my concern. I don't have a strong opinion, FDA versus USP. I understand the concerns around the reconstituting and the flavoring. I'm sure we can get to a happy place there, but I think the reference to the standards without it, it's $325 for 1 year for one person to access it, and it goes up from there. So depending on if you are a small pharmacy or multi-location pharmacy, it's quite expensive to have that. So that's just my concern, is that we're asking our licensees to reference something that they may not have the practical access to, or they have to pay something. And I'm not quite sure where we fit in that, but that's part of the fiscal statements or whatever, however that process works. So that's my concern, is just that the standards adopted by reference that's woven in throughout the body of this section. Like I said, I'm not an expert in compounding, so I will probably continue to have questions, but that's why I also would really like to be able to understand where public comment comes into play here, because there are plenty of experts around the state who live and breathe this topic, and to be able to understand their concerns and why or why not we're incorporating them into the rule. So.
Go ahead.
Staff member, just maybe a point of clarification and question to have the most helpful information for the board to have the best discussion. So I think a lot of the previous iterations of these, because there are a lot, if you look at in every board meeting, it did start with it being written, basically USP being rewritten. And the work group and the board had leaned towards just referencing USP and not being prescriptive of what USP is in rules. So that was kind of the direction that kept getting moved into this. And again, it's the majority of the board. Not all board members might have agreed, but whatever is the consensus is how staff is directed to be able to make these changes. So I think it might be helpful as we start to try to figure out the best way to prepare for the next vision. Our revision is for the board when you're thinking of your vision. If you could go back and look at those work group meeting minutes, it actually has all of those discussions and all of those actual iterations that went to rulemaking hearing and that were previous versions. And we could do a better job too, if there's a way that we could even take next meeting or another meeting and actually do all of that in real time with the board too, right? Like pull up iterations and do that assessment. I don't know, as I'm kind of spinning right now in my head too, what is the best way to juxtapose to show original versus it went to here, then it went to here, then it went to here, because these rules are a little unique in that they've had so many iterations. But I do think these are all really great discussion points, and we're all kind of full circle addressed and mentioned before too, in different opinions, different perspectives, but it might be helpful to see those as you're getting ready for the next board meeting. And those are all linked in the documents that were provided and on the website. They should be too, related to the mailings. Thank you.
Board Member Kroger, I'm okay if I'm in the minority on the USP standards by reference, if that's what the collective is okay with going forward. I just wanted to make sure that I stated that because that is a concern. And like I said, I don't all have the historical background, but I think prospectively, being able to understand the concerns more broadly than just those of us here is important to me.
Board Member Joyce, want to go forward from here, or do you have enough of an idea we want to go? I mean, I understand, Board Member Kroger brought up a very excellent point, the USP being a private entity and the cost. And you mentioned that the USP was incorporated into rules.
I'm not fully prepared to speak on that. I think Washington State may be doing it that method. They're in a similar place we are, to my understanding on compounding rules. California, I don't believe, I think they incorporated by reference, but had a lot of additional additions. That's all I have right now. More broadly than that, I can't speak to that, but in the various state board conversations that I've heard, this particular aspect of referencing USP standards within rule was concerns that I had heard outside of the state as well.
Merchant?
And I don't expect anybody to have the answer, but if a board is writing what is in USP in their rule, is that not a copyright issue?
I was just gonna speak to that. There is potentially the copyright issue of like, if you're trying to like copy the whole thing, like a lot of times we definitely can't just like copy their whole thing and put it on our website or, we can't, yeah. If you're looking at like specific individual rules that you're just pulling from it, I would need to look into that further. I don't know the answer to that,
I
but
don't think they're doing.
Right. Well, I mean, USP is, I see USP as the safety net, for, outlets that are compounding. And we can be more strict, or just follow USP. But there is a concern with that, is what I'm understanding. So, let's just move on, Gary, I guess, move on from this section. I mean, do you have anything else you wanted to get clarified? I mean, there's some discussion on the definition itself of compounding. I think Board Member Hall's comment about, they go lightly falling under, para A, is addressed appropriately. Does that address your concern, Board Member Patel? About the go lightly comment and the non-sterile
Sterile preparation compound does not detracting of good into manufacturing. I think that one will cut, but then there is other one too, diluting, oil.
Executive Director Runyon. So thank you for the discourse. And I think that's one of the intents of bringing it forward in this format, where we didn't also list a set of constraints as to what our intentions were, is just hearing you out, understanding not only what information you might need and to further consider this and come to some sort of consensus, but also in what format or how we can contextualize that to bring it back to you in a way that meets your needs so you can make the decisions that you need to. Staff Member Effermoff, do you have any inclination to, and you may not right now, any inclination as to how much staff time it might take to, as Board Member Kroger mentioned, maybe tease out all of the comments present in the work groups and public comments that were given to us, and contextualize them in reference to the rules as they exist now, and then the rules as they're proposed now, in some way that's kind of concise and easy to reference.
Board Member Kroger, before you chime in, Bree, I think that would be a huge undertaking to go retrospectively through that process. But I think to me, it's more, this process still deserves public input at this point, and I think that's the intent. And I think going forward, we need to give the public the opportunity to compound, to comment on these compounding regulations. But then as we look forward to that, I'm happy to discuss. I really appreciated how the California board, they specifically asked the public, like, this is how we want you to provide your comments, referencing the rule, what was the language, what are you proposing and why? And it was in a spreadsheet format. And then the board was able to highlight and show, hey, we incorporated this, or this is why we changed it or why we didn't change it. And it was a very thoughtful process that they went through, that I think would help myself understand as we go forward, what are the remaining concerns with the current language. So that's kind of my vision for that. And it's all on the California Board's website, like their meeting minutes and the comments they received, and then how they responded to that as a board. So Bree, I saw there's no way we can go back and do that because we didn't ask for it in that format from the public, but I think going forward, we could request it that way, which would make it so much easier for us to collate all of that from whomever is chiming in on the rules.
Executive Director, and thank you for that, those comments and guidance, Board Member Kroger. So we'll move on to the next section, which is 855-183-0010, or designation. Each drug outlet must maintain an accurate status of compounding services, indicating whether they perform sterile compounding, non-sterile compounding, or both in the board's online registration system. So this section was intended to help the board maintain an accurate account of who's performing what type of compounding, as we do not require separate registration for compounding or further designation of what types of compounding are occurring, as many other states do. And the current board online registration system would be eGov, and that can be updated at any time. President Joyce, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll just ask, does anyone have any comments on this particular section? Okay, I'll go around. Go ahead. Board Member Chen.
That we're not trying to be really prescriptive in rules, but if you say that you have to maintain accurate status with the board, is that correct? But when you do your licensing, it's every 2 years. If you change it within that 2 years, is there a requirement to update the board so that it's current? Is that what you're asking?
So this is drug.
Executive Director, and so this, for example, would be a retail drug outlet or institutional drug outlet. And number one, those registrations are updated annually.
Okay.
And so I don't want to read into this.
I was just curious. I was thinking every 2 years, and so I just, when an inspection happens and you just recently changed what you did and you didn't do this, where does that lie? So that's where I was curious, but it's just curious.
Executive Director, and so I think the intent here perhaps is to identify whether or not the outlet either performs compounding, or if they do, and if they do, what type of compounding they perform. So as I'm reading this, I wouldn't necessarily think that it would require a list of individuals that are compounding and what they're doing, which might further add administrative burden if that's what you're reading into or thinking. It's just whether or not they do provide those services, and if so, what type of compounding services they provide.
I understood that. It's just that during a course of a license, that can change whether as a company, I might decide I am going to do X rather than just X and what. So I was just curious if they had to update if they changed what they were doing.
Member Ekroth, I think one thing to keep in mind too with our eGov system, it's something they could go into all the time, anytime they want. So like when I do my CPE, I can go in and log it in today or tomorrow. And also we have like an inspection contact from the outlet. If that changes, they'll want to go in and update it. So it's like a
Okay,
free
there's a-
flowing communication forum.
Thank you, thank you.
This is Board Member Kirkbride. I don't think that's clear here. I thought the same thing as Board Member Chin. It sounds like you're updating it when you renew your registration. So maybe that can be made more clear. It sounds like it's an annual update when you renew your registration.
The way it reads, this, remember, Jen, the way it reads to me, it sounds like whenever I do my registration, that I'm updating this maintenance thing. And so that's what my concern was, if they were inspected and they changed what they were doing in that year's time, if that was gonna be a problem.
Or Patel, did you have any?
But John, you don't have any comment.
Or Kroger?
Member Kroger, I'm sure this could be wordsmithed to
Smith, yeah.
address those concerns fairly simply, so.
Or Smith?
Board Member Smith, I think this would actually be really helpful for the public. I currently work part-time at a compounding pharmacy, and it's kind of difficult for patients to track down sterile versus non-sterile locations. And if there was a place they could go, I think that would actually be really helpful, so.
Or Hall?
I have no comments on this section.
And Board Member Pinero?
Nothing to add at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I understood it at first read, but I can understand the confusion with, the confusion between, when this information, is submitted, so. I think we can move on.
Executive Director Runyon, I do have one question for Licensing Director Hennigan. So with this division, or with this designation, rather, would there be any way to incorporate that into the online license verification tool, for example, so that a member of the public could look up compounding areas in a certain area outside of having to use Google, which is what everyone does now?
Step Member Hennigan, I believe so. I would need to confirm that with the vendor to determine if, because that in this, our system, that's a data point that we created as opposed to a system, a standard field. So I can check on that. And so I believe so, but I'm not positive.
Thank you. And the Executive Director Runyon will move to the next section, 1830050, or personnel. And this is pretty standard language here, so nothing specific to really highlight. And I'll just go ahead and read it. Parent 1, all personnel who prepare and supervise the preparation of a compound must complete appropriate training and demonstrate knowledge and competency as required by USB standards applicable prior to independently engaging in compounding. Parent 2, training must be conducted by qualified individuals on a continuing basis and with sufficient frequency required by applicable USB standards to ensure that compounding personnel maintain required skills necessary to perform their assigned tasks and to comply with operations and policies and procedures. Parent 3, the training must be documented and records retained according to OAR 855-183-0550. Parent 4, each drug outlet must ensure A, for non-sterile compounding, personnel in the compounding area are authorized to be in the area by the person providing supervision when compounding activities are occurring. B, for sterile compounding, personnel in the compounding area are authorized by the person providing supervision to be in the area. And Parent C, an annual self-inspection is completed using the compounding self-inspection form provided by the board by July 1st. And within 15 days of appointing a new PIC, the completed self-inspection forms must be signed and dated by the PIC and retained for 3 years from the date of completion. President Joyce, I'll turn it over to you.
I will start off with Board Member Kroger section.
Board Member Kroger, I have no comments.
Yeah.
This section.
Board Member Smith,
Board Member Smith, no comments, seems clear to me.
Based on your inpatient hospital experience, this seems pretty standard, right?
I've not worked in inpatient.
Oh, you haven't watched inpatient, okay. Board Member Hall, you have?
Turn to where it says individuals on a continuing basis. Training on a continuing basis. That's just confusing to me. Is that annually or quarterly or every day or?
Every day.
That just a little unclear to me. And then I know in a previous meeting, we were talking about, animals in the compounding area. I don't know if this is a section that would be discussed, or at least when there's compounding being performed or whatever.
It's further down.
Executive Director Runyon, I'll just quickly address that comment. Apparently, we had that addressed further down in the rules. of the Animals.
This is Board Member Chin. If you actually just took out on a continuing basis and you did training must be conducted by qualified individual with sufficient frequency required and by applicable ESP standards.
All right, excellent. Board Vice President Kirkbride?
I don't have any additional comments, but I do, encourage the board to keep in mind as we are working towards more standard of care. I actually prefer language like this that leaves it kind of open. To use whatever practice standard you're using to determine what training you need instead of like being very prescriptive, which we're trying to move away from. So I don't have any issue with the way it's worded now.
So you like or you don't like the removal of continuing basis? Mark Kirkbride?
You're asking me if I like it or I don't like it?
The continuing basis part.
I think it's worded vaguely to give the people the authority to adhere to the standard. Like, you determine that.
Okay.
It should be sufficient to meet the practice standard. That's how I read it, and I think that's a good direction to go.
Neva?
Nothing to add.
I appreciate the discussion. Board Member Chin, anything else?
No further comments?
Board Member Patel?
Member Patel, I do remember there was a robust comment. I don't have my laptop in front of me, so I made all those comments, but anyway. There was some discussion about training must be documented and records retained according to OAR. I don't remember, yeah, and I think the more discussion was why we have to retain record. I mean, documentation, fine. You can say, yes, we done training and everything. I apologize, I don't remember full comments or anything, but there was something about that one, there was a discussion, but overall looks good, but the section 2 is it continuing basis. I think it should be training must be conducted. To be honest, personally, I don't like anything must in the rule. It should be shall. Should. When you say must, it's more prescriptive, but that's just me. It should be training shall be conducted by qualified individuals with the sufficient frequency required by applicable USB standards. So I don't know. I just don't like that whole section 2, but I don't know how to rewrite it. I'm going to need some time to think it.
Any additional comments for Member Kroger?
Member Kroger. I have general concerns with the training must be conducted and records retained according to OAR 855-1830-550. Like it's like a, a scavenger hunt for what are the requirements within the same division of rule. I'm not a fan of that. That is administratively burdensome for a licensee to really know what they are required to do. So either we move up the general requirements on training record retention to here, or we move this, like, it's scavenger hunts are not my friend in rule writing. And I think we need to be aware of that and clean that up so that we don't have licensees going back and forth trying to figure out what is the requirement here? What am I doing is sufficient or not sufficient without having to reference. I understand that we reference other divisions within our rules. And I think that in some certain circumstances is okay, but this is in the same division. We can clean that up and make it a bit more clear and concise and easy to follow for our licensees, please.
Any other comments? We've already gone around once. Any other comments? No? Okay. Let me just circle back real quick. Continuing basis and sufficient frequency almost seems duplicative. It's like you're saying, continue this sufficiently. I mean, I don't think we need continuing basis, but that's just my personal opinion. We can go ahead and move on.
Executive Director Running will move on to section 1830200, general requirements. We have effective date here, and then I'll read the rules. And here one, all drug compounding must adhere to standards of the current edition of the United States Pharmacopoeia, or USP, and the National Formulary, NF, including USP 795, pharmaceutical compounding, non-sterile preparations, and all chapters referenced therein, including but not limited to chapters 7, 51, 659, 797, 800, 1112, and 1231. Here in B, USP 797, pharmaceutical compounding, sterile preparations, and all chapters referenced therein, including but not limited to chapters 7, and not sure if I need to read all of those numbers. Yeah. A through Z. Here in C, USP 800, hazardous drugs, handling in healthcare settings, and all chapters referenced therein, including but not limited to 795 and 797. Here in D, USP 825, radiopharmaceuticals, preparation, compounding, dispensing, and repackaging, and all chapters referenced therein, including but not limited to a few additional chapters there. Parent 2, the verification of compounded non-sterile preparations, or CNSPs, and compounded sterile preparations, or CSPs, may utilize a system that incorporates following: barcoding to verify ingredients, imaging or gravimetrics to verify ingredient quantity and finished volumes. Parent 3, it is recommended that verification of CNSPs and CSPs not rely solely on the verification of components after they have been added to the final container. This includes methods such as proxy verification and the syringe pullback method. Parent 4, beginning and insert month, day, year. A drug outlet that prepares CSPs from non-sterile ingredients must maintain current Parent A, compounding pharmacy accreditation through the Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board, or PCAB, provided by the Accreditation Commission for Healthcare, or ACHC. B, compounding pharmacy accreditation through the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, or NABP. Or Parent C, medication compounding certification through the Joint Commission. And board member or staff member Mellon, if you could scroll back up to parent 1. And above that, we have the first effective date. So Obviously, we need to determine or need input on an effective date here. We can delete this and determine an effective date for the rules as a whole. And I think since so much time has passed since these discussions initially began. And then, of course, this must be compliant with the 525 version of the USP. Current rules permit old version or new, so not everyone is using the same standard. And if I'm not mistaken, there are certain states that actually require outlets to be compliant with the most recent version, or, for example, compounded products for Oregon couldn't be sent into their state. If I'm not mistaken, Washington might be one of those. So in other words, because we don't require compliance with the most recent version, and we allow compliance with either, they're not able to ship into Washington. And parent 2 can scroll down to that. Was placed to encourage entities to work towards using technology to enhance accuracy of dispensing and increasing patient safety. It was determined to not make this a requirement at the time this was last visited, but to revisit it and assess the need or opportunity in the future, which is what we're doing today. And parent 3 is another encouragement, if you will, to use systems that enhance patient safety. But at last view, the board did not make it a requirement, and staff direction to revisit it at a future date. And then parent 4, the direction provided was to require outlets that perform sterile compounding from non-sterile ingredients to receive and maintain accreditation from any of those organizations listed. So if the board would like to keep this, we could suggest creating a different effective date and then the rules in general, and it would take some time to get that in place. We'll need time to work with companies to have an inspection and needed arrangement to get in place there. And I think that's all the auxiliary comments that we had relative to these. So President Joyce, I'll turn it over to you for further comment.
Alrighty, Board Member Smith.
Member Smith, no further comments about this section at this time.
Okay, Board Member Hall.
Board Member Hall. I would like to hear what the public would say about all this. Just concern if we changed, for instance, may to must, like we discussed in a previous meeting, just the cost associated with some of the rural areas. I mean, where I work, we do this, but it may not be so commonplace, and so it is good for safety, but if it's just financially burdensome, that's a concern too. So, and then that was it for now.
Vice President Kirkbride.
Yeah, similarly, definitely interested in hearing more feedback and comments. I do want to pay special attention, sorry, to the section we just discussed about the accreditation and putting a date on that. While I am not a compounding pharmacist, I don't have knowledge in this area. I have worked taking a specialty pharmacy through accreditation with HC, and it can be a long process. And so I'll definitely want to learn more about that. Do we have any kind of sense right now what % of our compounding pharmacies are already accredited? Like, is this going to be a huge lift, or is this something that most compounding pharmacies do already? I don't know, because this isn't my space, but I would definitely want to become knowledgeable about that, because I know this process can be very burdensome.
Executive Director, and I do not currently have that information. But in between now and the next time we visit this, could certainly work to ascertain that.
Member Pinero. Oh, I'm sorry, were you finished, Vice President Kirkbride?
Yes, I'm finished. Thank you.
Board Member Pineda?
Board Member Pinedo, nothing to add.
President Joyce, I have a lot of experience with admix and the use of barcoding and technology, and admix, sterile compounding, chemo compounding, and we use, all this technology, including, audiovisual technology. We avoid using pullback method as much as possible. It can be dangerous. It's when you inject into a product, a solution, and pull back the syringe to show how much has been injected, and there is so much room for error there. We're talking about patient safety. I do want to hear from the public. As far as the may or must side, I mean, the implementation of technology in sterile admix rooms has, I know upfront costs are gonna be expensive, but prior to audiovisual technology and barcoding technology, a pharmacist had to gown up, stop what they were doing in the main pharmacy, gown up, wash up, and go into the IV room to check a technician's work. Now we have audiovisual technology. You can scan and trace the drug from the shelf to the technician, to it being mixed. It's scanned before it's mixed. There's all kinds of technology that dramatically improves patient safety and reduces the labor on the pharmacist. The pharmacist is not interrupted to have to gown up to go into the IV room. They can just look at audiovisual equipment or to verify compounding. They can just check the software to see if the correct medication was scanned. You can look at the software to see if the right solution was selected. Yes, these are upfront costs, but the amount of time it saves the pharmacist and not being interrupted, and the cost savings from that end, that has to be looked at. So I want to, hear from the public to see what they have to say about making some of these requirements mandatory. Thank you. Person Chin, I'm sorry, Board Member Chin.
As as a non-licensee, I have nothing to add at this section.
Board Member Patel.
Board Member Patel, yes, I know there was a robust conversation on this one in the past. We definitely have to hear from the public comment. Technology, barcoding, everything is great. And it's depend on what organization we are talking about. If you're a big hospital, cancer center, sure. It's depend on your payment too. And sometimes accreditation and everything is not, it's not by choice by that hospital or by that outpatient pharmacy or any entity. It's like based on your payer. So payer said, if I have to cover this drug, this compounding drug, then you have to be accredited by XYZ, and that's okay. But again, that's the payment, that's the reimbursement. And yes, it do save time, technology, everything, I do agree. But then again, that should be a choice. That do you want to save a time? Well, sure, implement the technology. But we as a board, we should not make that decision for the organization and licensing. This is a huge lift. Well, most of the hospital, I mean, if you're a hospital, you already are certified through the JCO, Joint Commission. So there is nothing, you're not doing anything extra. But think about the small hospitals, think about the other compounding pharmacy. That's the huge lift for them. And it's not only that you once and done deal. No, you have to keep maintaining it. So, and I know, I read all the comments and most of the compounding pharmacy, they say, no, we don't need that accreditation. We should not require we should say, it's best practice. We should not, as a board, we should not require compounding pharmacy to do this. About barcoding, pullback method and everything, sure. If you're talking about the Boston Children's Hospital, sure, they have like all kind of equipment, all kind of technology, but are we really going to compare that Boston Children's Hospital, whatever technology, safety precaution, all this they have with that one ruler, 2 or 3 bedroom hospital, 2 or 3 patient room hospital? Orange to apple. This is all great, but we as a board, we should not require that.
Board Member Kroger.
Board Member Kroger, I have a few comments. I think around the sections 2 and 3 with the recommendations, that like we're trying to encourage folks to use that. I think in rule, like this is the very, like I feel like it's very unnecessary in rule. Now, if we want to come up with a policy statement or a board information that is housed on the board's website, that the board encourages, these types of activities to ensure the safety of compounded products, and we can have a very robust statement on that, I think that would be more appropriate than having a may in the rule, especially as board member Joyce had said, some of these maybe aren't the safest methods, right? But it almost is like we put our endorsement on that as a board. I think it's very opposite of standard of care type regulatory practices, where when we start listing off specific, because I'm assuming practices and technologies will change and there will be different or safer methods within the validation of compounded products. As far as the receiving and maintaining accreditation, I would like to hear from the public on this. I think I am for, especially for sterile product preparation. That is some of the most dangerous types of compounded products that could really impact a patient or multiple patients' lives if done inappropriately or in a non sterile manner, obviously. And I think these accrediting bodies are there for a reason, to prevent and to ensure that those practices are. I know we have our own inspectors who are very well educated and in tune to all of this, but it is not to the level of an accrediting body where it comes to really putting patient safety first. So I don't know if there's other ways to obtain the accreditation. I don't know what the general public thinks about the requirement for the accreditation for these non-sterile and how impactful that would be. Would we be shutting down compounding in certain situations? And that would be a concern. However, I think the patient at a small rural hospital should receive the same type of care from a large urban hospital as well. So I'd like to kind of understand the impact that would have on facilities that do non-sterile, or excuse me, that prepare sterile from non-sterile, because that's a small little subset, I would assume, of the practice. And then I think just in general, all drug compounding must adhere to standards in the current edition of USP Pharma. Then what's the rest of the rule for? We could just stop here. I jest a little bit because I know there's some, but we've got pages and pages of rule. But if this is what we, hey, we're going to go with USP standards and NF standards, then we don't need to have rules that say, in addition to the national standards that we've all agreed have been vetted, et cetera. So just kind of as thought on that. So those are my comments on this section. Thank you.
Board Member Patel, I just want to clarify. So this is the new section added, right, recently. It was not here, like, let's say, 6 years ago. This is recently kind of added.
Executive Director Runyon, do you mean the section of rules in the new Division 183?
Number 4,
Or
just the number 4, the accreditation portion.
Executive Director Runyon, yes, I believe that's new.
Yep.
Entirely, yes.
There was a robust discussion in the work group that why we are adding now. And then, to be honest with you, the whole due to this section of verification of compound non-sterile preparation, that one too. I think they all are the new section. It was not.
Is Board President Joyce, in regards to Board Member Kroger's comment about, well, we have USP, but that's the bare minimum. I mean, that's kind of like the safety net. You know, the board has the flexibility to add its own rules to be more strict. I mean, we're just saying at the very least follow USP. And we can say, well, you know, if you use technology, the barcoding, and everything else, you may decrease the risk of infection. Or, you know, the board can implement rules that say, hey, if you use this, you'll increase patient safety, decrease risk of infection. You know, USP standards are just kind of like the bare minimum. Okay. That's how I see it, because the board does have some flexibility to be, you know, more strict to improve patient safety. So that's my opinion. Any comments, further comments on this section? Sure, I can't tell. Okay. Barry, have you heard enough from us on this section? Or do you want more?
Executive Director, and I was gonna ask you the same for today.
For Gary.
No, I think we have sufficient comment to proceed with board direction there. We can move on to 1830205 or technology and automated compounding devices. Just read down the rules here. And parent 1, for the purpose of this rule, an automated compounding device is a device that compounds, measures, and/or packages a specified quantity or individual components in a predetermined sequence for sterile preparation. Parent 2, a drug outlet pharmacy, hospital with a drug room, DIPDO or dispensing practitioner drug outlet, CF or correctional facility, or CHC community health clinic may use an automated compounding device or ACD to, parent A, assist with the compounding of the CSP, or parent B, produce a final CSP. Parent 3, if a drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC uses an ACD as described in parent 1, the outlet must establish and maintain written policies and procedures in addition to the policies and procedures established and maintained pursuant to OAR 855-183-0500 that address the following. Parent A, the qualifications and training that a person must have to operate the ACD. Parent B, the routine maintenance and cleaning required to be performed on the ACD, which at a minimum satisfies the requirements for maintenance and cleaning established by the manufacturer of the ACD. And parent C, the testing required to be performed on the ACD to ensure that the ACD is measuring and dispensing the components of the compounded drug product and preparing the final compounding drug product with intolerances of not more than plus or minus 5%. Parent 4, if a drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC uses an ACD to assist with the compounding of a drug product for parenteral nutrition, the drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC must establish safe maximum limits for each additive that may be used in compounding such a drug product. That outlet must ensure that A, the ACD will not allow compounding the drug product for parenteral nutrition, if a maximum limit for an additive will be exceeded until a pharmacist, after consultation with the prescribing practitioner, makes changes to or validates the correctness of the prescription or chart order. Or B, if an ACD cannot be programmed to not allow the compounding process as described in parent A. A, if the ACD is equipped with an audible alarm or some other mechanism that will alert the pharmacist if a maximum limit for an additive has been exceeded. And B, the drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC has written policies and procedures to prevent the continuation of the compounding process once a maximum limit for an additive has been exceeded until a pharmacist, after consultation with the prescribing practitioner, makes changes to or validates the correctness of the prescription or chart order. And 5, if the drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC uses a computerized order entry system in conjunction with the ACD, the pharmacy must ensure that the computerized order entry system will cease processing the order if a maximum limit for an additive will be exceeded until the pharmacist, after consultation with the prescribing practitioner, makes changes to or validates the correctness of the prescription or chart order. And lastly, parent 6, a drug outlet pharmacy, DIPDO, CF, or CHC must make and maintain records that evidence compliance by the outlet with policies and procedures required by the section. And just of note, before I turn it over to you, President Joyce, parent 1 and 2 are may, and then parents 3 through 6 are a must if an outlet uses an ACD.
Right, so falls perfectly on Board Member Hall. You check TPNs, right? And you make adjustments to them?
Member Hall, I don't know if this is already written or if this is newer, but yeah. So establish safe limits for the additives. Is that something that we would have like written in policy at the drug outlet level? I mean, who's determining the limits? Was my question. Then if it's like per pharmacy, PPM per pharmacy, you know, if it's something that we do all the time, is it something that we can choose the limits for an additive? All I have right now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, but Board Vice President Kirkbride?
Yeah, that's a lot for a non-compounder. Sounds exciting and cool. I do like that there seems to be multiple methods. So regarding, you know, whether the system will automatically detect and stop or whether there could be an audible alarm or some other method. So it does seem to incorporate various levels of the technology, and hopefully that's enough to cover, you know, different types that all the different entities would use. So it seems to be flexible in that regard. Other than that, I don't have any comments to share.
Remember Pineda?
Board Member Pinedo, nothing to add.
This Board Member Joyce. Yeah, I share the same sentiment concerns Board Member Hall has. However, you know, how much of this is like clinical practice, what the pharmacist does, as opposed to what we're trying to say, what has to be done. It's kind of like that standard of practice versus, you know, are we impeding too much on the clinical judgment of the pharmacist in these rules? Because, I mean, this is what you would do, right? I mean, this is normally what you would do when you're working on parenteral nutrition, TPNs. I do, you know, I do understand all of this language and it's clear to me. It's just putting it into rule is like, it's already kind of out there as the standard of practice. It's also, you know, what the pharmacist is already doing, practicing pharmacy, using clinical judgment. And the equipment part, I know is there for safety reasons, and I would hope that this is what is going on at places where they mix TPN, et cetera. I don't necessarily want to make any changes. I just wanted to bring that up as a discussion because it seems like this is already kind of clinical practice. The equipment part, I don't disagree with it at all. Thanks. Member Jim.
Board Member Chin, the only thing that I add, well, just in my understanding is the DIPDO, CF, and CHCs don't have pharmacists. So when you're talking about standard of care, standard of practice and stuff, those don't have those licensees every day doing this work.
So that's why I would be supportive of this current language as written.
No other comments?
Member Patel, if you ask me, the whole this section, 855-183-0205 is absolutely unnecessary. Absolutely unnecessary. So now we are going to tell whoever has this automatic compounding device, we are going to tell them how to use it, what is your limit. Even though we have CDTM and even though we have protocol, just for the TPN or any other thing, me as a clinical pharmacy is ultimately, I'm going to be deciding whether this person needs the additive or electrolytes, how much macro this person is going to need. I'm going to look at the patient, whether the patient is hypovolemic or hypervolemic, where is the sodium, where is all the electrolytes, and then I'm going to decide. And do you guys think like all automated device is going to be manufactured by everyone is going to be the same? It's a different manufacturer. They're going to have different capacity to set the mean and max limit. And this whole section is new and I think is unwarranted. This looks like someone is writing the SOP, standard operating procedure, for the organization. And that's what we don't need as a rule. We should create a rule, not the standard operating procedure for all the licensing and organization. So my 2 cents, scratch out the whole section. It's unwanted, unneeded.
Member Kroger.
Board Member Kroger, I do feel like this reads like a policy and procedure. And my concern with that would be is policies and procedures within various organizations can be updated a lot more quickly than board rule. So I do feel like while as a non-compounder, it all sounds great. I completely understand that this was done with patient safety in mind. Absolutely, that's the heart of this as I read it, but it is to me more about policy and procedure versus what I feel is appropriate in board rule. I think USP has standards around these automated machines as well, that we could reference and I don't believe that USP is the bare minimum standard. I think it is a well vetted and in some cases, the top standard, like it would, and it's taken years for these new USP standards to be written, and I think they are quite fully encompassing versus the bare minimum standards that and I'm not gonna pretend I know more than the body, those individuals at USP who came up with these standards. But for this section, I think it reads too much like a policy and procedure versus a board rule. Thank you.
Board Member Smith.
Board Member Smith, I'll probably look at this section some more, to try to get some more understanding on the specifics of everything. Thank you.
Did I miss anyone? Any additional comments? Yeah, I would like to say I am torn between removing the whole thing and liking keeping it here. Yeah, it does read like, this is what you're supposed to do. And just, reiterating, Board Member Kirkbride's comment about, yes, this is focused on patient safety. But, restricting, are we placing limitations that could impede, care anywhere? That's a potential for sure, so. To you, Gary.
I have one more comment before we move on.
Oh, yeah.
Board Member Kirkbride, I think this brings to light Board Member Kroger's comment without the context of why did this section suddenly appear? Is it because we had a lot of entities reaching out to ask the board questions about their technology and it's not addressed in the current rules? Did they want this? Like, was this a result of, feedback, and where did this come from? Is helpful to contextualize. Is this here because more guidance needed to be given because we're getting questions? Or is this truly, not needed because it's a standard of practice? And I think that's hard for some of us to answer without that kind of context. So I do think that brings to light Board Member Kroger's comment. Thank you.
Good. Any other additional comments before we send it back to Executive Director? And actually, it's about lunchtime, right? Yes. So we will break for lunch. Do you guys need any extra time for compliance stuff or? May I ask if does anyone need to go into executive session again to rediscuss any cases? Or anything executive session wise? Okay, all right, we're breaking for lunch back at 1.
Okay.